What's going on, guys? We are Tottenham TV here, back again with another match preview. We are previewing the game against Everton at Goodison Park on Friday night. Joining me today is Thomas from the Toffee Blues. How are you doing, Thomas?
Yeah, I'm very good. Thank you for having us on. And it's been an interesting season so far. Obviously, we've got like 7 or 8 games left. I hope we can potentially push for Europe, but let's see what happens.
Yeah. Looking back from where you were at the start of the season, your tails were up. Just signed Allen and Decore and James Rodriguez, star signing from Real Madrid, and winning your first 4 games of the season. Some Evertonians even had dreams of a title charge, top 4 challenge, a bit like us at the beginning of the season. So nothing to be scoffed at, but. How would you assess your season up till now? Currently sitting 8th with a game in hand over us in 7th. What are your expectations from now to the end of the season? How do you assess how your season's gone?
So far, there's a way of saying we've been inconsistent, but to be honest, this is still largely the same squad as Ancelotti inherited. Obviously, he did bring in James Rodriguez, who's been injured for large parts of the season. His other signs, Abdoulaye Doucouré, Alan, have both had long-term injuries this season. So it's tricky to really assess how far we've come, purely because of it's largely the same squad. I mean, people have been disappointed that we should have been picking up more points against sides lower down the table. I mean, Newcastle did the double over us. We lost at home to Fulham. Our home form's been shocking. Our last 2 games drawing against Palace and Brighton. It's been really annoying, really frustrating in terms of the season as a whole. But I think if we look from last season to where we are now, there's clear improvement. It's disappointing that we've dropped out of the immediate European places. We can still get back in there. We do have a game in hand, but it has been quite frustrating at times. We have had a significant amount of injuries. I mean, I know every team's had injuries this season and it's affected everyone, but we have had some pretty significant ones at times. I mean, our bench against Brighton the other night, Alex Iwobi was on there, and it was basically just the rest of them were the under-23 players. We basically have no one left, and our squad depth has really hurt us once again. And that's only something that you can really build up with time. And one transfer window for Ancelotti just, it wasn't enough. It would be very good to see us get European football this season. I think it's probably the expectation now. We've kind of let it slip a bit, which is, we can only blame ourselves. But we do have that game in hand against Villa, as I mentioned, and games like coming up against yourselves are actually the games where we've done better this season. Obviously, we've not to rub it in, but we have obviously beaten you twice this season. We beat you early in the season. We've beaten the teams around us in the top 6, and it's the lower down teams, as I mentioned there, that we've struggled against. So hopefully, if we get a good result here, we can push into European places. But still a lot to play for, especially in this season where it doesn't seem to matter if you lose a must-win game one week. You've still got the rest were must-win games, and we'll just see where we are come the end of the season. But hopefully, it is in a European place.
And how much? So you feel like Ancelotti's made a big difference to this squad? Because I'm seeing a lot of praise for him. How he's kind of instilled a different kind of mentality, or he's trying to at Everton. Do you think he's done a great job for you guys?
Yeah, I think he's done a very good job, especially considering, as I mentioned, that he has only had one transfer window. And what I briefly mentioned before is our squad depth as well. We just have basically nothing to come off the bench. We brought in Josh King on deadline day in January. He's barely made an appearance. He hasn't made an impact whatsoever, and we really struggle in squad depth. So the base team, the starting 11, if everyone was fit, I can see us maybe we should have done better with that team. But it's the squad depth that's hurt us, and Ancelotti's done a brilliant job so far. I can't remember. I think it was 12th we finished last season, which was ridiculously disappointing. This season, there's a few games left. We're still pushing for Europe. It's going to always just be time with Ancelotti. I mean, it'll be disappointing if we don't get European football this season, as I think we should do. But next season, it's another transfer window. You'll have another January, you'll have another summer, and it's all going to be building up the squad over time to help us compete with the teams above us. Like the teams that we are pushing, I mean, apart from West Ham, who have done very well. If you look at the other teams like yourselves, like Liverpool, like Manchester United, I mean, we're not pushing for Manchester United, but you know what I mean, that we don't have the squad depth of other teams, and it has really hurt us in some games where we don't have much impact off the bench. So if we've got what we've got in the starting 11, if they're not good enough, then that's basically it. So Ancelotti, he's done a very good job considering all the everything that's around the club at the moment, all the injuries we have had. But yeah, he's doing very well, but it's always going to be a matter of time before we are really pushing up the table consistently.
Yeah, in terms of since Ancelotti's come in, I see, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm seeing Everton playing a fairly pragmatic style of play in the way they play. They're not exactly the most open and expansive footballing side. Does Ancelotti ever come under fire from Evertonians for maybe being too pragmatic in some instances? Because I'm just comparing it to, what I'm seeing from a lot of Spurs fans when we complain about Mourinho sitting back too much, being too pragmatic, inviting too much pressure. Is there anything Everton fans ever put to Ancelotti?
It's definitely what a few will mention, but I mean, you're going to get divisions in every fan base. I think it really suits us in the games against the teams above us. So we had a terrible record against the so-called top six or whatever for years and years, and all of a sudden that's the thing that's brilliant this season, and our results against the bottom half of the table is bad, and maybe that's partially responsible. We are used to setting up defensively against the bigger teams, counter-attacking, and when we played the likes of Newcastle, I think we struggled at times taking the game to them. So of course he's going to come into criticism from some. But about that style of football, but it's probably one of small points that it's cost us, and that taking the game to teams lower down, that's going to come with time. That when we do have all our best attacking players on the pitch, we are going to improve against the likes of Fulham, Brighton, Palace, Newcastle, all teams that we've dropped points against this season. And people are obviously going to criticise them because of some of the football. Some people just want to see open, expansive football, and I saw a ridiculous tweet at one point this week saying he'd rather us lose going to win the game than draw not trying to win, which is ridiculous. I mean, it's about getting points on the board at the end of the day. But of course, there's going to be a minority of fans who really criticise the defensive football. There's another group of fans, probably that like myself, that obviously I can see its benefits, but I think it has led to us struggling against some teams low down the table. But as I mentioned, it's all a matter of time with Ancelotti, and the style of football. It's one of some pretty significant games this season. And hopefully, he's going to push us into European football.
Interesting. And in terms of Calvert-Lewin, James Rodriguez, Richarlison, how do you assess their seasons up till now? Obviously, obviously Calvert-Lewin started the season extremely well, scoring very, very consistently. The goals, I wouldn't say the goals have dried up, but maybe he hasn't quite hit as many goals as maybe you would hope. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's probably a fair assessment. He did have that brilliant start to the season, but that was also a time of the season where everything we touched seemed to be turned to gold for quite a while. It was it was definitely a strange time to be an Everton fan. Not that I was complaining, but it was something we haven't seen for a long time. And I think this was always going to happen. He is still a very young player, and he was brilliant at the start of the season. He still works hard for the team. Like you said, the goals aren't as consistent as they were, especially kind of since January, February time. It's maybe. There are definitely areas to improve, which he will improve over time. I mean, this has been a standout season for him so far in his career, and every season he's building upon the last. So I mean, we can always just believe the next season's still going to be better again. I mean, there's been a couple of games where, like the Crystal Palace game, we had more than enough chances to win that game. We didn't convert them, and of course that does eventually come down to the striker, no matter how young or inexperienced you are, maybe. But no, he's got plenty of potential, and it's been slightly disappointing to see him fall away, but I think purely just because of how brilliant his start of the season was, that no one really expected. It's now really raised the bar in terms of expectations, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's maybe why some fans have been criticising him recently, purely because he's not hitting the same heights as he was. But I don't think that was ever going to happen. I mean, at the end of the day, he's not Harry Kane. He's not a scorer. He's not a player who's going to be scoring consistently in, week out, and he can always rely upon. So, as I mentioned there, I think he set the bar very high for himself. Maybe fallen away slightly, but probably just about where he wanted to be this season in terms of his goal tally anyway. I mean, he's still scoring for England. He's scored, I think, 3 and 4 now, which is a brilliant start from there. And it's all about building on this next season and pushing on to be more consistent.
Yeah, and Richarlison, I'm pretty sure, if I remember rightly, he was obviously subject to some bids in the summer, and he said that he spoke with Ancelotti and he was convinced that this season you could have a real good crack at top 4, and he was convinced to stay another season. Is there any worry or anxiety about him potentially leaving in the summer?
In terms of rumours, there hasn't really been a lot that's circulated. I mean, there's been more in the past going into these summers, but also in the past we've had managers like Marco Silva it hasn't looked brilliant for us. That you can see why he maybe wanted to leave, but now he's working under Carlo Ancelotti. We're clearly on the up, where in comparison to other managers maybe we weren't. And Ancelotti's definitely got a lot more persuasive power. And look, Richarlison's a very good player, and he's been a very good player for us. But this season he hasn't been at his best by any means. And I think in terms of, as I mentioned, there aren't really many rumours. I mean, there's plenty of time until the summer, and I'm sure it'll go on, for the entire window. But at the moment, I think he will probably stay, and I think he should definitely stay because he's now got a manager. I mean, how many teams is he going to move to with a higher caliber manager than Ancelotti at the end of the day? If he wants to improve his own individual game, okay, I think he's going to do a lot better here. But I mean, if he wants to go and win trophies every season, I mean, there's a few clubs that might take him, but I'm not sure he's going to be guaranteed success wherever he goes. In terms of, I mean, I can't see him moving to the very top clubs in Europe at the moment. So I think he's better off just staying, working under Ancelotti, and then seeing where we are in a couple of seasons' time.
When, as an Everton fan, we're looking at Spurs and looking at Mourinho as well, given that you have a manager who is fairly similar in terms of long, successful career, not on the young side, but still has quite a few years ahead of him. How do you look at Spurs, and do you see Mourinho from outside looking in as a player who's maybe past his peak or finished, as they say, or as a manager who can't keep up with modern football, or do you see him very similar to like Ancelotti in a way that he can still be relevant in the modern game?
I think Mourinho could definitely still be relevant, but I mean, what you mentioned just before to me, and I've picked up on that as well, is man management. It just doesn't really suit the game now. I think tactically he's still right. I mean, Ancelotti and Mourinho play similar football, and they both had success. In the past few years anyway. They both still had success generally, but in terms of his man management, I mean, just the one example, obviously, that sprung to mind after the Manchester United game was his treatment of Luke Shaw. Didn't go down well. Luke Shaw was really out of favour. His apparent falling out with Paul Pogba as well at the time. And I don't know too many specific Spurs examples, apart from, of course, Dele Alli. He seems to be alienating a few players more than he probably should. And obviously, that's his way of managing. It's gotten to where he is now, so who am I to criticise? But I think that's maybe why he's probably struggled in the past few years, purely because that style of man management isn't helping him anymore. But of course, I think they can both still be relevant. And I mean, you are in the League Cup final, of course, against a very good Manchester City side, so it'll be interesting to see how that game goes. But it's in those games in the past where we've seen Mourinho come into his own in those, when he was, I mean, even back when he was the manager of Porto playing that Manchester United game, despite the fact you are underdogs going into the game, he knows how to win finals. And that is thrown around that, he does know how to win. And I think in a few years, if he hasn't won much at yourselves, if he's still there, of course, that might start wearing off. But I think he can definitely still have success, not maybe to the heights that he once was. But I mean, yeah, he's still a very good manager nonetheless.
Yeah, but do you see a Spurs team right now that is seriously underperforming, or do you think maybe there's too much expected of what Mourinho could achieve with this squad?
I definitely see it as underperforming, especially, I mean, you look at Heung-min Son and Harry Kane, players that could absolutely propel you to the very top. And even in your midfield, I mean, Ndombele didn't have a particularly good season, when he joined, but now he's looking brilliant, every week. And Højbjerg, despite the fact he had a tricky start against us, he's come into his own as well. So I think then you are looking more defensively where you are struggling, and maybe you need more recruitment in the summer. But I mean, I'm not really sure what the situation is about Toby Alderweireld. I've always thought he's a brilliant defender, and I don't really understand what's gone on there. And I think you've got the absolute DNA for success in that front line and in your midfield. But it's how long. Obviously, there's been rumours linking Harry Kane to leaving if you don't get too much success this season. And I think it's how long can you keep that team together before those players are looking to maybe move to hopefully win some trophies for themselves. So I think right now I think it is underachievement. I think you absolutely should be probably challenging a lot closer to the top four, if not in the top four. I mean, we're seeing West Ham and Leicester. I'm sure you've probably got a better squad than the West Ham, definitely, and Leicester have a very good squad as well. But I do see it as underachieving, especially because of the firepower that you do have. And it's not as if Kane and Son have been in poor form, and that's why you struggle. I mean, they're in the form of their lives in terms of their link up, and it's one of the best link ups we've probably ever seen in the Premier League. So I think it's probably disappointing, especially for those two, seeing where you are in the table and seeing that you're not quite pushing for Champions League. But I mean, plenty of games left in the season. You could end up there. Anyone could end up in there, and we'll have to see. But at the moment, I definitely do see it as underachievement. Yeah.
And in terms of on Friday night, how do you see Everton lining up?
I think it's going to be tricky because we have had a lot of injuries, and they're not even necessarily injuries that are keeping players out for long times, apart from the likes of Kabaman and Alan. But going into the Brighton game, we didn't realise how many injuries we had until we saw the team sheet, basically. So it's very tricky at the moment to really see how we are going to line up. We had one fit kind of central midfielder against Brighton, which really didn't help us at all. But in terms of the lineup, in terms of the setup, we know we are going to sit quite defensively against yourselves, and I don't think in terms of the XG fans on Twitter, I don't think it's going to be one for them, despite the fact that there was the 5-4 in the FA Cup. But I mean, Coleman and Digne are playing very well. Digne maybe not as good as he wants to have been, but Coleman's come into his own in the past couple of weeks and has been very good. The likes of Ben Godfrey and Yerry Mina. I mean, actually saying Yerry Mina, he actually also picked up an injury against Brighton. I don't think he will be playing. So I mean, it's come down to the point where we really are struggling just to fill a starting 11, never mind the bench as well. But wow. I mean, the likes of Richarlison, James Rodriguez should be back as well. I mean, he's come in and out of the team in terms of injuries, but he is back fit, hopefully, for the run in now. Richarlison will play, probably Tom Davies as well, purely just looking at who we have. I mean, just the very brief list of injuries from last time. I mean, Bernard, Delph, Decore, Gabamin, Gomez, Pickford, Calvert-Lewin. We are kind of on our last legs in terms of the side. So it's quite tricky at the moment to maybe predict how we are going to line up and who we're going to play, depending on really who's fit at the time. And I think we'll probably know. I mean, I say a bit closer, probably about 5 minutes before, we'll maybe know the injury news a bit better. But it's really tricky at the minute to really predict where we're going to go, purely because we don't know who's going to be fit at the time.
Fair enough. And what's your prediction then for Friday night?
To be honest, based on our past form over the past 5 games or so, it shouldn't be good. But I mean, it's already 2 wins against Spurs this season, and these are the games where we seem to flourish. So I'm going to go for a 1-0 Everton win, as I mentioned. I can't see it being as open as the FA Cup game was. It was the most ridiculously out of character Ancelotti versus Mourinho setup there's ever been, and I can't see that happening again. I can see an Everton win purely because these are the games that we have been winning this season, and if we do get this win, it's really going to put us in a good position for European football, especially with the game we've got in hand. But I mean, I really don't know with Everton at the minute. I mean, getting 0-0 at Brighton was poor. Not closing out the victory against Crystal Palace was poor. I mean, we lost to Burnley, just before the international break. So it's really tricky to predict an Everton result. But as I mentioned, these are the games where we're doing a lot better than we are against the lower downside. So I'm hoping for a 1-0 Everton win. I can see that definitely being a real possibility. But again, depends who's fit, depends who we manage to get on the pitch, never mind on the bench. So I'm hoping for a good result. But as I mentioned, I'm really not sure.
All right, Thomas. A pleasure having you on as always. Thank you for giving the Everton side of things. Go over and subscribe to the Toffee Blues. We also have a preview going out on their channels. Go over there and check that. Link will be in the description below. Thomas, thanks for joining us.
Oh yeah, thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure, and let's see where both teams are come the end of the season.
All right, and as always, come on you Spurs.